So this is the Japanese-American internment during World War II. So the tension between Japan and America had been building for many months, and on December 7th, Admiral Yamato Izuraki and the Japanese army attacked the naval base in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. They bombed the island, which resulted in 2,403 deaths and damaged 27 U.S. Navy ships. This caused all but one U.S. senator to agree to join the war. Additionally, Japanese American citizens were no longer trusted, as they put it, in America. After Pearl Harbor was attacked, many believed that Japanese Americans were actually spies without any evidence, and that they would be loyal to their homeland, Japan, instead of America. Because of this, they were considered a threat to America and were to be relocated into internment camps. Directly after Pearl Harbor, more than 1,200 various Japanese American political, religious, and community leaders were rounded up and arrested with no further cause other than them being Japanese Americans. All American bank accounts and assets in Japan were frozen at the time. Weeks after the attack, many first-generation immigrants were no longer citizens in America, and 12 restricted zones were created for Japanese Americans, which gave them many rules and a curfew to follow. And if they broke any of the rules or stayed out past their curfew, then they were to be arrested. A lot of American farmers supported this because they believed that Japanese Americans were taking up their land. The American Secretary of War, John J. McCloy, stated that national security is more important than civil liberties, and that the Constitution, when it came down to it, was just a piece of paper. The end goal of all of this was to round up, in their words, all Japanese Americans and send them back to their homeland. Carl Benson said in 1942, "I'm determined that if they have one drop of Japanese blood in them, they must go to camp." After the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the Alien Enemies Act, presidential proclamations 2525, 2526, and 2527 were issued, designating Japanese, German, and Italian Americans as enemy aliens. Japanese Americans were given 4 days to 2 weeks to prepare to leave their homes, gather all of their belongings, and whatever else they needed to take care of before they got sent away. Anything that they couldn't fit into one bag was just destroyed, and they were never to see it again. A lot of people who owned businesses or lands tried to sell them. And those who couldn't just left them behind, and many of them sold them for fractions of what it was worth. Trains were sent out by the U.S. government to relocate citizens. They were sent to assembly centers, which were made quickly. They were mainly built on abandoned fairgrounds, racetracks, even things that weren't even meant for humans, like sheds for horses and cows. And that was just for temporary relocation until they went into the permanent relocation centers. In the camps, typically there were barracks and eating areas. The average living space in the camps was 2x4. They got cots and cotton or hay, mattresses, and a blanket. Daily rations were less than 38 cents in the camp. Starvation and overcrowding were common issues in the camp. There were communal bathrooms and washrooms. Medical conditions in the camp were inadequate, and disease was common. And disease spread very rapidly in the camps because of the close living spaces. Many of the people who were in the camps became emaciated because they didn't have enough rations. During this time, many Japanese Americans were school-aged and didn't have proper education yet, so they actually built schools in the inside of the camps to educate them while they were there. The quality of education was very low there. They didn't have a good budget because they weren't the top priority in America's list, I guess, and there were not enough pencils, pens, books, desks, anything. The ratio of teachers to students was about 40-1, and the national average now is about 25-1. They often hired people with no education, no degree to be teachers just because they were that desperate, and they honestly didn't know how to teach. The public's reaction to the farms. Many white American farmers were in support of the Japanese internment because they sensed competition from Japanese farmers because they were growing on American soil, taking away land from white farmers. After Pearl Harbor, a lot of Americans started to see Japanese Americans as dangerous and associated them with Pearl Harbor. So they believed that it was a good decision to put them in the camps because they were threatened by them. Politicians in Hawaii claimed that imprisoning that many citizens at once would hurt the economy. A lot of journalists agreed with the internment and a lot of disagreed, and there was a lot of news coverage on these. And many liberals, minorities, and Christians spoke out against the camps, saying that they were inhumane and that they should be shut down. And they were also compared to the enslavements of African Americans and the camps in Germany that the Jewish people were held in. On December 18th, 1944, the Supreme Court ruled that incarcerating any American, no matter the race, incarcerating any loyal American, no matter the race, was inhumane, and this started, to give them hope that they were going to get out of the camps. The Roosevelt administration passed Order 21, declaring all Japanese Americans may return home. And on January 21st, 1945, they were allowed to return home. Trains were sent to take them back to their homes. But when they got back, they had almost nothing left because they had to get rid of everything to get rid of the camps, including their businesses, homes, everything. So they had to start new when they got out of the camps. This made a lot of Japanese Americans immigrant back to Japan. When they went home in America, though, they experienced a lot of racism and discrimination and violence because of everything that happened. But every Japanese American who was sent to the camp received $20,000 in compensation for their treatment and losses at the camp from the government. And they could also apply for compensation for financial loss. $37 million in total was given by the government to the Japanese citizens. In 1942, the Presidential Commission released an apology to everyone affected, and they also acknowledged the racism of the internment and the hysteria and the failure of political leadership.